So in this video, what we'll be doing is creating a basic view application that has search, create, read, update, and delete functionality. So we're going to start just by creating a Viewify project. We are going to select this option. We don't want TypeScript. We're going to be using NPM, right? And as we know, this is going to create the initial application, and it's also going to add to that application some starter code, which we will then have to delete. Right, so once it completes, we have to go into that folder. It's IT 2204, and we open this folder in Visual Studio Code. Then we say npm run dev, and that's going to start the application. So I'm going to go in as before. I will go in and delete the stuff that we don't want, which in our case is going to be source components, this one, hello world. Doing this would break the application, because if we come in here, it uses hello world, right? So let's get rid of this, get rid of that, all right? Again, this is going to create a problem for our application, but that's fine, good. Let's just put a simple div here and put hello. So all problems are resolved. Now, let's go ahead and create our component. So we're going to create a component that will house our application, right? We've put our entire application into one component, and in the future video, we'll break that up into multiple components, right? So we're going to come to new file, and we're going to call this entire component the student manager component, right? View, and we're going to be managing, let's call it user, not student, user manager. It's just going to manage a collection of users, right? So let's start with creating our basic template setup. So it's template or HTML, template. We would put a simple v container here, so it's not empty. Then we also need to set up our script section. We put setup here, that's good. And we come to our home view or home component, and we say import user manager, and we use the user manager here. So that's fine. The reason we aren't seeing anything is because the only thing in the home component is the user manager component, and it's empty, right? So, but that's fine. Now let's go ahead and give this fill height. And I believe there's also fill, which is actually fluid, which fills the width, all right? Now, what we're going to need in order to do search, create, read, update, and delete operating on students, one of the first things we'll need, obviously, is um, a support for actually getting the student information. And as before, we are going to use a simple form, and we're going to have two rows, a table at the top and the form at the bottom, right? So let's first create two rows. So v dash row, this is going to be the row for the table. So table row, and we'll have another row for the form, right? The form row. We are not doing the table as yet, so this is just the form. I believe we used aligned center before, so you know what that does. And then we are going to put this form in the center, and we know that we need a column for the table, We're going to say calls. I believe last time we used 6 and we use an offset of 3. But again, these simply provide structure. They do not display anything. Then we put a form. Again, structure again doesn't display anything. It's reloading, but this shouldn't result in any errors. This should work. So let's wait and see. All right, it works. Now we need our actual form. I'm going to come to our previous project and I'll take some code from there so I don't have to retype all of this. Oh, so we actually use a card before. All right, so we'll use the same structure, copy the entire card and do that. Good. And I will also want to copy some of the body here. So I want to copy, I'll copy all of this for now, but I won't use all of it. This is just so that we can get started. Right. Good. And we seem to have some errors here. So let's start stripping this down. So we don't want this one where it's asking if you want to share sex. We don't want this one. So I'll get rid of this. All right. Good. And let's see. We'll get rid of this VIF because we don't need this either, which means we'll get rid of the else if and the else as well. Good. And then, all right, I think we're solid there. So let's see what the error, what error is happening here. Unexpected token, next password. So that is here. Why is this red? Oh, it's missing one. Right. Good. Save. It's taking a while to reload. All right. This works. And I'll probably get rid of the region as well. We don't need that. So I'll get rid of these two. Then I'll get rid of the loop, which is here. Save, and here we have what we actually want. All right, great. All right, so this is the form that we're starting with. Just let me make sure that the clear works. Good. All right, so everything is working just fine. So here we have our form, and we have the infrastructure for reading data from the form into our state. Now what we need now is a table, right? Such that whenever we hit submit, it's the data is added to the table, right? And we're going to add our table in this row here, all right? So it's going to take up the entire row as well. So we're going to say v-call, and we set calls to 12, which is the entire row, all right? Now to actually use the table, we'll come to Viewtify, and we'll come down to, there's a section here called, I think it's called data data tables, I believe. Right? So you have the standard tables here that you can use, and this is the code for using it, where you're actually using the V table. This one is highly customizable, but it's a lot of, you have to actually write out V table, the table head, table rows, then the render, the row, and then the table cells, right? Which is standard HTML. So this one should be fairly straightforward to work with, and it is basically standard HTML, right? Except for this. Good, just V table instead of table. But the one we're looking at are the data tables, all right? And in the data tables, this is where you have more flexibility, all right? So with the data table, this is what it looks like in its basic setup, right? And what you need to do is you need to provide items, all right? And the items represent the different columns, right? There's also headers that you can put, but this is just very basic. So you just have the items and you have them in an array, and each row is going to be displayed in the table, all right? And they can take and I believe it can take the name, the header names from the names of the um, properties, all right? So let's give it a shot. So we need to create some items that look like this. Now, since we are displaying a list of users, then our items need to look like this. All right. So what we're going to do is to create a holder, an array for that called users is equal to ref, and it's going to be empty like this, right? So it starts empty. And this is where we are going to get our users from, right? Now, notice we don't have any table there as yet. Now, there are different ways to do this table, and there is a version where you specify the header, which is here where you specify headers separate from items. So I think we can let's do that one. So when you come to script, you have constant here, and that's a desert. You're looking for headers. There is a way to do the headers, and here we have the headers, right? I prefer this approach because you don't have to have data in the array to see the headers, right? So this is what we'll be using. Sorry, constant headers is equal to ref, and these are going to be the table headers, right? So you have title, align, whether it's sortable, and the key. All right, the key, we'll talk about that in a bit. So let's start with title. So title, right? We have first name. That's the first one we're going to use. Alignment, well, I believe it's going to be aligned to the left by default, or the start. So or you can choose to change that. And we want the key, which is going to be for us first name, right? So the key has to match the property. So it would look at the property and look at the table key and to know which cell to place the property in. All right, so that has to match. And then well, sortable is true by default, right? So save. Then we need to now place the data table, which is template. We need to place this in the actually the table. Sorry, that's actually the wrong one. My bad. Let me find the correct version of this thing. All right, here, right? This is what we're looking at. So we need to put the data table with the headers and the items, all right? We don't have any sort by in our context, so we'll ignore that aspect for now. So here where we have our table, we put it, come here, do this. I'm just going to get rid of the sort because we are doing that. And I'm just going to tab these into format it properly. We don't have headers, but we have users, right? Then we save. Never, I'm not sure where that came from. Oh, that's just a form. The browser thought I was creating an account or something. Good. And here we have our table, right? So this is what that looks like. So we have first name because that's the only header that we have, and the table is empty because we didn't add any data to the table, right? So let's add the other. This is actually incorrect. This should be a property in there, right? So let's go ahead and add the others. So we want first name, we want last name, let's see what else we want. First name, last name. We're going to take sex, and finally email address. Good. And as you can see, we have it at the top there, right? Now, you can also notice that the table is still empty, right? So what we want to do is, when the submit button is pressed, what we want to do, we're not using this anymore. When the submit button is pressed, what we want to do is this is an array, right? We want to add a new element to that array. So when the submit button is pressed, we say users, which is a collection of users, dot value dot push. All right, push is how you add an element to the end of an array in JavaScript. And what we're going to do is to say user info dot value. Right? So user info dot value is would be this variable here, which is connected to the form. As data is typed into the form, the values of user info or the properties get the different values from the fields, right? And when you hit submit, that array is added to the array of users, right? So if I am to fill this up and hit submit, as you can see, it's then added to the top, all right? If I change this, you notice what's happening there? It's also, look carefully at my name. Look at my name. See that? That is not what we want, all right? The reason that's happening is because this user.value, this entire thing it's reactive, right? So the instance of this object here is actually being added to this array. But when I make a change to this, it's making a change to the copy that's also in the array, right? As a result, we have this situation. So one way around this is to copy over the values, and that's what this does. Right, so now we shouldn't have that problem. So if I do that, then I change my name, notice it's no longer changing, right? So that is something you have to be careful about when you're passing these objects around, right? Remember, it's still linked to this source. So just like in Java, if you create an object outside of a method, then you pass that object to the method. If you change the state of the object while it's inside of the method, it will also change the state of the object outside of the method, right? So if you simply pass this in to this array, the link still exists between the one in the array and the one used in the form. So what this is doing, it's creating a copy it's creating a copy and sending that copy into the array. All right. That is very straightforward. Remember from a previous video, we covered this aspect. where we're saying where we introduce a V model, and we spoke about how there's a two-way binding between the properties of this user info object in terms of if the state changes, the UI will change, and if the UI changes, the state will change, right? So if we come here to init user, we have first name, last name, sex, email, and password, and um, so the user info has these values by default. And then up here, we're saying the model user info name, which connects this text field to the username property of user info. And we do that for all the other user info properties, right? And then from there now, we're seeing that when the submit button is clicked, we're copying the existing user and passing that and adding that to the array. We have to say username.value here because it's a reactive property, and in order to actually get access to the underlying data structure, you need to use value. All right. Push is a JavaScript method on an array which you use to add an element to the end of an array, right? And that is how the um, search the create and the view is working, right? The view is working, the view aspect is working because we've created our array, right? I don't think this needs to be reactive though, right? Because it's hard coded and it's not going to change dynamically, all right? This can just be a normal non-changing variable, right? So here we're setting up our headers. We at least we need a title, which is what we want to display here, and the key. What is the key? Well, this is a column in a table, right? The key is simple. I'm going to pass an array of items to the table component, right? Those items will have keys. So the way each table decides what to display is that it looks for the property with the name that is or the value of its key, right? So the column with the title first name is going to look for the property first name in the array of users or in the element of the array of users, all right? And last name is going to take the element from the array of users and search for the key with the value last name, and that's how it's going to decide what to actually display. All right, so we have so far the create and the read operation. Next, what we probably want to do is to add the search operation. All right, now for the search, there is usually a section for that. Slot simple checkbox entity. Let's see if we can find one. Just need to find with the search bar at the top. There is no search bar at the top of any of these, so that's not what we're looking for. Let's try data and display. It's probably going to be right here, right? Where we have, what's this? Filterable. But um, just look for this. Oh, look, it's right here. Nice search bar. So how did they do that search bar? All right. So here they have a table, and the table has a property search, and it's bounded to some variable called search, right? And then above that, they have above the table they have this vtext field, and it has a v model to the property search. All right. So now you can come to script, and then you can just copy. You can just see the code. Right now, this is using the options API, not the composition API. So you simply can copy and paste this stuff. Right. So here we have we need a property called search, and we need a text field with a v model for search. So what I'll do is I'll copy this, I don't think you need this aspect because this v slot text, that's for the card, right? So we come here and we want to put our hours above this table, and voila, it works, right? And we need this variable search. So we come here and we type constant search, and it has to be reactive because we want the table to change as we type there, right? And voila, right? Good. Then for our table itself, we need to bind its search property to the search variable. Now this variable here can have any name. We're just calling it search because of convenience, right? The property and the variables, they don't need to have the same name, right? As you can see just above here. So the way this should work is as we type in this field, this table should get filled, right? So let's quickly fill this in. So that's one. Good. And then submit. So now if I came here and I type, right, it's filtering. And there we have our search feature. So as you can see, the search feature is very simple to implement. Now, if you go through the content on data tables, you'll find that there are a lot of other properties that can control many other aspects of a table, well beyond what we are doing here now, right? So, and in Beautify itself, there are many other things that we can actually look at, not just the the small things that we are doing here. If you take some time and you do some reading on the Beautify documentation, you'll discover that there are a very wide range of capabilities within the system. And keep in mind that Beautify isn't the only one. There are also many others, right? All right, so here we have our form and our table. And so far we've implemented search, create, and read operation. The next one to implement would be delete and update. All right, so we did some fast word magic there, and we'll get into doing update and delete operations, right? So the first thing that was done is that the two forms were created. One for the update, and we still have the create form, right? So the create form still works as it did, but the reason we have a separate update form is so that when we select an item in the table, that information goes into this form, right? Now let's just do backward test. Submit, this should add something to the table. And as you can see, we have actions column added, and we also have the password column added, right? And in the password column, you're not seeing the password. Instead, you're seeing this password mask. How was that done? Well, if you come to data tables, and if you come to the data table component, which is here, you can see we added this stuff to it. The one we're going to focus on right now is the second one, right? Now, you don't have to understand exactly how this is working, but what you need to do is to know this part of it, right? Now, essentially what's happening here is that if you want to customize how a particular row or sorry, how a particular column is edited, you can create a slot using a custom template element for that, right? So what we're doing is that we're saying that we want to control how the password um, column is displayed, right? And if we wanted to display the value, then we could have just said value, right? Because Here we're extracting the value from the password, right, into a variable called value, and then we can just display the value there, right? But we don't want that. We want to display this mask. That is why we have that, right? Now a similar thing can be done for the actions column. So if we come down to headers, we added a new column called actions, all right? And what we're doing here is that we're seeing how exactly the actions column should be rendered, right? That is this first column here, right? And what we're doing is that we're displaying a button. So each cell in the action column will have a button. In this case, we're using value here, and in this case, we're using item. Value is going to give you the value that was going to be displayed in the cell, all right? Whereas item is going to give you the entire row item. So what's happening is we are adding a button, which is this button, sorry. We're adding a button, which is this button here to the actions, to each action row, or to the action column of each row. When that button is clicked, we're passing the item to a function called set selected users. And if we scroll down, set selected users takes the value that was passed to it, creates a copy. That is what this part is doing. It's creating a copy of it, and it's setting that copy to equal to selected user that value. Now, all selected user that value is, it's just this, right? It's just an empty reactive object. The idea, and then now selected user value is now linked to the update form. All right. The idea here is that when a row is selected by clicking its edit button, that row is going to be assigned the selected user. When the selected user updates, this entire form is then going to update. So if we click this, the information appears in the form. Now the reason we're copying it is that we don't want, when we change the value here, the value in the form also updates, all right? So let us run through this very quickly. Good. And I think I should probably add another. Remember the password, the username, sorry, the email address needs to be different because that's our unique identifier. So now we have two rows, right? It says when, now it says run, right? So as you can see, when we select the row by selecting the edit icon, we're changing what's in the table below. And as you can see, this table here isn't updating, right? We can clear this if we want, and it's still going to work. But now, how does that work again? So first of all, we added a new column called actions. We are using, this is a bit of magic here to dictate how the column should be rendered. And we're saying for each cell in this column, put a button with the edit icon. And then we're saying that when this button is clicked, we're passing in the entire item or the entire row. And we know that that row represents a user, right? Or we're passing in an entire element or item from the user's array, right? We know that this is a user, so we're passing that to set user, and set user is assigning it to selected user. It's creating a copy of it. If we don't create a copy, then when we're updating this, we're also going to be changing this, which is not really what we want, right? And yeah, so now in order to, so if I select this one and I update this, right? You notice this didn't update here, all right? So what we need to do, what we can do, is we can find this element and just change the name or just update it, right? So what we need to do is something like this. We say, for example, I think it's users. Let's see, users, right? Which is this one. users dot value dot filter, or we can also use find, right? And here we're going to have an instance of user, and we're finding the one where user, actually we cannot call this user as well and this user, so I'll call this selected user. I will call, let's see, let's call this user and call this selected. Good. So what this is going to do, it's going through all the users in this user array, right? So where user dot email is equal to selected dot email, right? That's the user we're looking for. And if we find this user, I'm just going to say console.log. This returns a user found. And found user dot, yeah, that should be it. So what we're doing is we're passing in the user that was selected, creating a copy of it. We actually don't have to copy it as yet. Because this well, this is fine. This controls what is displayed in the actual form. And then we're saying that we want to find the user that has that ID and log it, right? So this should actually be found here, right? And this should actually be selected user that value that email. So when we select a user, we're simply setting the selected user, right? When we hit the update button, which is this button here, right? Then we want to actually go through our user list and find the user with that ID, all right? So here we have when the update button is clicked, the update function is called. So let's see if that bit there is going to work. And since we're logging the information, we have to come to console here just to see if it's going to work. So let's quickly start by doing this part, submit. That should add it now to the table. Let's select it, which adds it here, and let's update this. Good. Now when you click update, then this function update should run. And as you can see, it worked, right? It worked. Good. So progress. Now let's see if we can update that through here. Founder user dot, it should be value dot first name is equal to, we're just testing this. Good. Nothing there. So we come here, register a user. That's working. Select the user, change the last name, and hit update. And then we should see good. So therefore, it didn't update this. All right. Good. We have an error. Cannot set property of first name undefined. I don't think there is value here. That was a bug. That's not, we don't have to put value there, right? So let's see now if it's going to work. We try again, add the user, select the user, change that, then select update, come here, and as you can see, it changed, right? We managed to change the first name. So what we're doing here is that, so that works, right? You don't have to worry about that anymore. So what we're doing here is that when the update button is pressed, we're finding the user that was selected, and then we're going to change the properties of the found user to match that of the selected user, right? Now there are many ways to do this in JavaScript, but I'm just going to do it this way. The easiest way, the way that doesn't require you learning anything else, right? That value um, do that. Let's see, this is a constant, so it can't be reassigned. All right, so found user dot first name is equal to selected user dot value dot first name, and then we do last name, and then we do, I think the next one is sex. We then have another one for email, and a final one for password. All right, so here we go. Now, again, while I'm copying this manually, there are many other, there are JavaScript specific shortcuts that allow you to uh, copy over the state of an object into another one. But that requires that you learn some JavaScript specific structure and syntax, and we won't cover that aspect here. All right. So let's try this again. So now we select person, we create a person, sorry, create a user. Let's create two users. So once we scroll up, we should see two users. Good. We select Ryan. His information is added to the form. Lovely. We switch the gender. And when we select update, when we scroll back up, the gender switched, right? Switch it back to male. Scroll down, select update, scroll up back. It has changed. All right. So how does this thing work again? Well, again, we added set selected user so that when a user is selected, it's added to the selected, it's assigned selected user, right? Selected user is also the V model for the elements of this form. So that's the other part of the two-way binding. Remember, when the state changes, the view is also going to change, right? So because we're changing the value or the state of the selected user object, this form, which has its V model, which has its elements V model to this state, will automatically update. Then, when the update button is pressed, what we're doing is we're searching the array, we're finding the element that was selected, and then we're updating the element we found, which is the found user part of it, with what is in with what is currently in the form, which is the selected user part of it, right? And that's how we are updating the table. Now, delete is very simple. What we need to do now for delete is write to this actions column here. We're going to add delete, right? That big garbage bin. Um, I believe we can say size SM. Let's leave that. Let's leave the sizing out, right? So we have this setup. Good. Now, when this is clicked, we do want set selected. Do we want this, or we just delete the user, right? You can just call delete here, right? We say delete user. and we're passing in the user that was selected, right? So we then need to create a function called delete user. It's going to accept the user that was selected. We then perform, in this case, instead of a func, we're performing a filter. So we say users. So the way we're going to delete it is that we're going to create a copy of the list with all the elements except the one that was highlighted for being deleted, right? Before we do it, let's see if this would work. You simply find the user, and let me just check this thing very quickly. um, where is it? Get map for mapping templates. Let's see uh, if we can just call. All right, so these are longer approaches for doing delete. Let's just stick with our approach, which is very easy for you to understand and doesn't require any new knowledge, right? So what we're doing here, we call filter instead, right? And what we want to do, so delete here, selected is the user that was selected when you hit the delete button, right? So if, and we're going through the list of users here, right? So if the username, the user's email is equal to the user that we want to delete, then we don't want to include that user. We want to exclude that. We want to filter that user. Oh, that user should not pass the filter test, right? So what we say is that we use not here. So we only want those users who do not have this email, right? So we then say users.values equal to this. And this in turn replaces the user array, right? So when we say user email not equal to selected email, we're saying we want all the users whose email address is not equal to the one we select. That is, we want all the users but the one we selected, right, for deletion. Right, so that's the first user. That's the second user, right? If we select delete, right, that works. And if we select delete, that also works. All right, so that is how you do a very basic create, read, update, and delete component using Vue. Now, in an actual Vue project, you won't have a component that does all of these different things. You would actually divide these different features into different components, especially the table and the two forms. Those are the easiest items for decoupling. And that is what we're going to look at next.